Donald Trump and his administration have said that they've resumed nuclear tests. The New START treaty, the last remaining nuclear treaty between the U.S. and Russia, is due to expire in February 2026. We've had Russia test a number of weapons, two in particular that the BBC is very worried about here. The nuclear-powered, nuclear-capable underwater drone, and then, of course, the Berezovsky nuclear-powered cruise missile. In the context of the Trump administration saying that it's restarting nuclear weapons tests because other countries are doing it, talk about the significance of these weapons that Russia has unveiled, why it has at this time.
First of all, we're not restarting nuclear weapons tests, so just stop that nonsense. Trump's tweet shows the ignorance of the man. He directed the Secretary of War to carry out these tests. Sorry, Secretary of War, not your bailiwick. It's not your portfolio. We have other agencies to do that, affiliated with the Department of Energy and overseeing our nuclear weapons. The Secretary of Defense or War has nothing to do with that. We do subcritical tests. We've been doing subcritical tests for some time. So has Russia. So has China. These means that whatever we do, we don't get fission. So it's not a nuclear test. It complies with the test ban treaty, and we're going to continue to comply with the test ban treaty. What happened is that the president was informed that Russia did 2 nuclear tests, the Berezovsky and the Poseidon. They both were tests of a nuclear propulsion system. The Berezovsky, as the Russians apparently have done that which we could not do. It's been taking a long time. 1957, I think, is when the initiating instruction was given to Russian Soviet defense industry to produce a nuclear-powered cruise missile. We started our own project around that time. We built a couple. They're dirty as hell. We fly them out and they just spew radiation. We said, my God, we can't do this. And so we stopped. The Russians, they actually continued this. They have some very good nuclear research centers in Russia that in the United States we don't have the equivalent of. Yes, we have Sandia, we have Los Alamos, we have what the hell's the one in California?
Berkeley.
No, Lawrence Livermore.
Yeah.
And we got other, but the Russians have the one near Moscow that does mainly commercial work now. But they have another one. I think it was what was that name? Secret City, Arzamov or Armazov or Razumov or something like 116. Whatever. The bottom line is they converted an old seminary into a nuclear research center for their weapons program. And these guys have worked with the civilian guys, and they've produced apparently a clean nuclear reactor, small. It basically generates heat, and then this heat will superheat air and do what a scramjet does. You superheat air, and then the expansion of the air propels the thing forever because you're not running out of fuel. You got a nuclear engine that's replicating what the fuel's supposed to do in a turbofan and all this kind of stuff. The Russians did it. They succeeded, and they tested it. That same concept of a nuclear propulsion applies with the Poseidon drone. Drone is unpiloted vehicle. That's what a drone is. Basically, it's a vehicle with no pilot. So it's going off either based upon pre-programmed information or receiving communications from outside sources. These were the nuclear tests that the Russians did. And the president, because he's literally dumber than dirt, was told the Russians had done nuclear tests. So he said, well, we got to do our own nuclear tests. And so what we're getting right now is a Minuteman being put into the test silo, I believe, at Vandenberg, and we're going to do a launch. So we can say we tested our nuclear. Well, hell, we just did another test of the Trident D5s. The president's too stupid to realize we've been doing nuclear tests forever. We just did life extension tests on the D5, popped off a number of them. So it's not like we don't, but now he has to declare it because he feels intimidated by the fact that Putin has now declared these two tests. What's the significance of this? Look, Ray was kind enough to publish something the other day about a conversation that Vladimir Putin had with journalists, Western journalists in 2016, where he basically said, you guys are too stupid to live. Do you not understand what's happening? When you got rid of the ABM treaty, which, again, Ray dating himself, I'll do it for him, 1972, Ray was there in Moscow when it was signed. That's something. foundational treaty because it recognized the fact that nuclear wars can never be won. Therefore, they should never be fought. Therefore, we shouldn't even bother trying to build defenses against nuclear weapons because it's just stupid. People will build better offensive weapons. And yet the United States withdrew from the ABM Treaty, and then we began to deploy systems, the GBI system in Greeley Air Force Base and Ground Base Intercept in Greeley Air Force Base. Interesting movie just came out on Netflix. Can't remember the name of it right now, but it doesn't work, and it won't work. Every one of those missiles is handmade because the one before it had a problem, so they had to fix it. They're not in serial production. And then we started taking Aegis ashore. The Mark 41 system used to launch missiles, either Tomahawk missiles or SM-3, SM-6 anti-ballistic missiles or anti-air missiles. We put them ashore, one in Poland, one in Romania. And the Russians went, that's a little close to home. Then we started deploying Aegis ships around the Russian periphery designed to shoot down missiles. And we put in this missile defense thing. And the Russians went, that's not good, because even if it probably won't work, but if it does, it creates the perception that the United States could launch a preemptive strike against Russia, attempting to kill as many Russian missiles as possible, and leaving the Russians to say, if we launch, or the United States is going to shoot down most of them, we won't get the damage we want. Then we get a second and third strike from the United States that'll wipe us out. So the idea is to dominate the nuclear deterrence profile so that the Russians are in an inferior position and therefore not likely to start a fight. And Putin said, but that's not how we operate. So in 2016, he said, we're going to start things. I can't tell you about them right now, but we're starting things. In 2018, he unveiled them. The Sarmat missile, heavily ICBM, which travels around the South Pole, not the North Pole. We have no early warning defense capability at all. Comes in, they could hit us. We'll never even know it happened. The avant-garde maneuvering hypersonic missile, it actually works, unlike anything we produce, which doesn't work. The avant-garde works. Gosh, he did. He talked about the Boresnik, nuclear powered cruise missile. People poo-pooed it because right after he advertised it, they had an accident in the North. 5 nuclear scientists died. That's, by the way, how we know so much about the propulsion system, because the Russians, in surprising fashion, actually identified who these scientists were and what part of the defense atomic agencies they worked for. And anybody with a brain on their shoulders reads their bios and reads their PhD dissertations and understands the research they're involved in. You go, oh, you just explained a lot about what's going on with Burevestnik. And then, of course, Poseidon, same thing. He declared it. It's there. That was 2018. Here we are today. Sarmat's deployed. Avant-garde's deployed. Burevestnik and the Poseidon have just finished their final test. Now the Russians are seeking to figure out how they're going to incorporate them to their doctrine. How do we control this? Well, New START was the treaty. And the Russians have always said, we didn't know how we're going to classify these weapons, how we're going to account for them. Because once you start building one category of weapons, if you have the cap of 1,550 deployed nuclear warheads, you got to remove weapons from someplace else. There always has to be this balance. But now what's happening is if the treaty goes away, there is no cap. So the Russians can keep current capabilities and expand these capabilities and deploy them. And what's the United States supposed to do? We can't even build the Sentinel missile. We got a Minuteman III missile today, which is decades old. The guys operating are younger, sometimes twice as young as the missile they're supposed to fire. We can't replace it. We said it was going to cost, I forget, $145 billion. When that account came out, I said, we're looking at a $2-3 trillion system that will never work. And everybody went, oh, Scott, you don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about, because now Congress has stopped funding it because the price went above the Nunn-McCarty cap, whatever Congress got tired of the defense industry underbidding projects, then beginning the projects, and then demanding they continue to fund it. F-35 come to mind. And so they passed a law that says when you get a spike, you have to stop the program. And the Sentinels spiked twice in a row, and they don't have a solution. And so the Sentinel's done. Now they're going to extend it to Minuteman III to 50 years. It's going to be, 2050 now is when it's supposed to go. We can't even do that. We don't have the defense industry to do that. We can't do anything. And the Russians are out there doing everything. Scott, you love Russia. I like Russia. I don't love Russia. I love America. And I don't like it that we have this president who gets told that we have the biggest, baddest, most wonderful weapons, and we can't produce anything. Oreshnik, People think it's a bluff. It ain't a bluff, ladies and gentlemen. It's as real as it gets. And we can't stop it. And it's in serial production. And we don't get it. The last treaty is expiring. It's not going to be restarted. It's done. On February 5th, we will have no more arms control. Now, Vladimir Putin has said he'll extend the moratorium for 1 year to buy time to get the United States to wake up and get engaged. But who's going to engage? The people that do arms control are highly skilled specialists. Ray was one. I was one. We're not there anymore. You don't grow these people like grass. It takes time. The people that negotiate ABM treaty, were negotiating that for years, and then they went on to do SALT 1, SALT 2, then INF, then START 1, START 2, START 3, SORT, New START extension. And today they're all retired. We haven't trained new people to do it. The diplomacy muscles have atrophied. We don't know how to do this. And the people that were doing it just got fired. July 11th of last year, 1,300 State Department specialists, the Russian specialists, the arms control specialists, gone. Who the hell is going to do this? Who's going to negotiate this treaty? Where are the experts out there? We are outclassed by the Russians, both in terms of actual systems. We're outclassed diplomatically. We're outclassed in terms of consistency. Say what you want about Vladimir Putin. I'm not going to sit here and sing his praises. My God, he's been in power for 25 years. Yeah, I think he has a good grip on what Russian policy is and what Russian capabilities are. And we keep throwing new presidents in every 4 years. I mean, lately we can't extend the presidency. Trump lost, then Biden lost. Now Trump's only in for 4 more years. That's a seesaw effect. Who's going to replace Trump? We don't know. No guarantees. But the point is, the policy does this. And when you have policy that shifts, that means your funding gets screwed up. You spend too much money on too little results. Meanwhile, the Russians are there after 25 years. They fine-tuned the system. Everything's working like a champ. Oreshnik was directed in 2021, became operational in 2024. Find the American equivalent of a high-tech system that gets directed to be built in 2021 and 3 years later is ready to go to work. We can't do it, guys. We simply can't do it. It takes 20 years, 30 years for us to do this stuff nowadays, and we still can't do it because it's too damn expensive.
I'm glad that Scott referred to that very bizarre meeting where a bunch of Western journalists were in St. Petersburg for an economic summit. And he asked them to come for a small meeting, maybe 14 people around the table. And he said to them starting out, look, I know you people, we're both mature adults. I know that you're going to not write up what I tell you. I know that you're not even going to tell your editors and your publishers what I tell you. But let's talk man to man. I'm going to tell you what's going on. You guys, with your ABM, we're not sure it will ever work, but we're not waiting. We're developing offensive missiles. Here's a quote. The absolute linchpin for strategic stability was the ABM Treaty of 1972. And when George W. Bush got out of it, that was a, quote, colossal blow to the system of international security. I said then that we're not going to waste a lot of money on ABMs that might not be effective. Rather, we'll continue to develop new generation weapons to defeat the ABM system. So offensive missiles. Now, some things I cannot tell you right now publicly. It would be improper. That was 2016. Well, they developed nicely so that by 2018, as Scott has alluded to, in Putin's State of the Union address, he did a show and tell, 6 of these new systems. And Scott has already told you about what's come online. The big question is, how much of this Trump has been briefed on? My God, it seemed like a revelation coming from heaven that not only the Oreshnik, but the what is the Buravyesnik and the Poseidon, he reacted so quickly. We're going to do the same thing, in other words, the main problem seems to me equally the lack of specialists, but equally, the people who are too dumb to tell our president, look, we need to come to terms with these people. They're doing their best. Last thing I'll say on this. Yeah, the New START treaty runs out 5 February. No hope to amend it or improve it or anything. It's over. Putin has on the table September 22nd an offer to do a moratorium, to keep the quantitative limits, which I think, Scott, correct me if I'm right, they're 1550 for each side on offensive missiles. Keep that in place for a whole year so we can figure out what to do and not run amok with being released from any constraints. Now, Ryabkov, the deputy foreign minister, said just last week, look, this is not an unlimited offer. I mean, it's going to run out. February 5 is coming. What's your response? Now, this is what I want to drive home. The way the Trump administration responds to this eminently sensible request for keeping these quantitative limits on is what will determine Putin and his coterie of specialists, their view on how serious the U.S. is or how much latitude Trump has to do anything meaningful with respect to relations with Russia. If they do it, then there's hope. If they don't do it, well, Ukraine goes down like this, and the Russian hopes that there can be a more decent relationship with the U.S. goes down with it, in my view.
Given everything that you said about the weapons that Russia has been able to roll out, its military-industrial complex, all of this advancing at such a breakneck pace, why is it then you have Europe? Why they seem to continuously, almost in league with the continuation of the conflict, and of course, the absolutely disastrous relations now between Russia and Europe. But as these weapons get rolled out, as Russia becomes more and more able to defend itself and, to stave off the threats like the Ukraine conflict was, you have the Belgium's foreign minister or defense minister, sorry about that, saying that NATO would flatten Moscow should a Russian missile strike on Brussels occur. What do you make of this rhetoric? What is happening to Europe where it is essentially even speaking more aggressively in many ways than the United States toward Russia?
Look, Europe is a bunch of caged chihuahuas. They are incapable of doing anything. They're not even cute. It's an insult to chihuahuas. I mean, it's these are useless people, useless human beings. I gotta be careful what I say here because I don't like this guy. He doesn't know that of which he speaks. I mean, it'd be one thing if this guy was a military hero. This guy could do 5 push-ups. This guy could do anything. Look at his background. Look at his resume. Look who he is, and you'll know what I'm talking about. This is a guy that after he made this statement, because of the press blowback, had a nervous breakdown. He can't even flatten his own newspaper. These are people who are programmed to say the dumbest things at the dumbest time. This is like Kaja out there, Russia needs to be broken up into tiny little states. That's the only way we're going to have peace. A little Baltic woman thinking she can break Russia up. It's like Mark Rutte, a failed Dutch prime minister, suddenly, growing a pair. No. These people don't know these aren't the real deal. This isn't somebody who's been there, done that, got the t-shirt, understands the consequences of their words. These are fakes. These are fronts. These are, superficiality personified, coming up there saying things on cue because they're living off of a script actually written by the British, if you want to know. This is a script designed to keep Ukraine in the fight. Keep the European Union relevant, keep NATO funded. In order to do this, you have to say the dumbest things, because otherwise, if the truth comes out, come on, Belgium, Belgium's going to, they can't even make a waffle anymore. We make waffles better than they do. So,
I was not a fan of the waffles in Brussels when I went a couple years ago. I have to say it wasn't everything that it was made out.
It's just these aren't serious people, and yet their words are parroted on the media as if they're serious words. Belgium can do nothing. They can flatten nothing. They have no capability. NATO can do nothing. They can flatten nothing. NATO is only relevant with the United States, and the United States doesn't want to do anything. I want to remind you, while he's speaking about flattening Russia, the United States made the decision to withdraw from the Romanian theater of operations, where we have, the 101st Airborne Maintaining Brigade. We just sent elements of the 3rd Infantry Division in there. We're going to drop that number. It was 1,600. We're going to take it down to under 1,000. We're starting the process of withdrawing from Europe, not reinforcing Europe. So while Europe is speaking about building up this imaginary army, they'll never be able to fund or equip or do anything with. And who's going to fight? In Germany, if Germany was invaded, this is according to a German poll, if Germany was invaded, only 16% of German men said we'd fight for Germany. That means Germany has no men. Because if you're not willing to fight for your country, you ain't a man, especially because you've been invaded. And yet the Germans are like, no, we don't want to die for our country. That's how about if somebody invades Germany. Now what happens if Germany starts going off invading other countries? Do you think the Germans are suddenly going to change? Oh, wait, if we're invading another country, I'm ready to go to war. Germany, who wants to build the biggest military in Europe to become the European powerhouse, can't even motivate enough fake men to sign up to defend their own country. And they're the strongest nation in Europe. Europe is a freaking joke when it comes to the military. They got nothing. And they're only there because America is backing them up. But we're not going to back them up forever. We're getting the hell out of Europe because we don't want any of this. Trump just washed his hands of the war. I don't know if people listen to what he said. Sometimes you got to let them fight it out. That means we're done. Right. Are you going to give them tomahawks? Probably not. No, you're not. You know the consequences. Putin putting you on notice what the consequences are. We're out of here. The Ukrainians are going to get slaughtered. And this propaganda exercise that's propping everything up, making people think that Ukraine's in the fight, suddenly when they're all dead, you realize how stupid people were to believe any of this.
Yeah, the European leaders are really a bunch of political hacks that rode through the system and now don't know what to do. I mean, it's very embarrassing. How are they going to change their policy? Are they going to say, "Oh, we spent X billion euros and pounds and all, and sorry, but we lost in Ukraine. And besides, we're really sorry about all the social benefits we had to cut back. But so we just made a big mistake." They're incapable of doing that. They're incapable of recognizing that sooner or later they're going to have to do that. Now, I want to inject one note of hope here. That Belgian defense person and Kaya Kallas, and they're out of this world, or out of their own gourd. But one person who happens to be the prime minister of Belgium told it like it is with respect to the other Europeans trying to seize Russian assets and use it to fund the war in Ukraine. He got up and made a masterful speech and said, "Look, you guys tell us that we Belgians, even though most of those assets are in our banks, that we don't have to worry about it. We have no liability. Well, forget about it. We're worried about it, and you ain't going to do that." Okay. I learned later that Bloomberg, a week before, had said the U.S. will discourage Belgium from letting this happen. So why do I mention this? I mention this because if there's no more money, okay, then the Europeans are just going to have to figure out what to say for the next few months until the inevitable defeat of the Ukrainians in Ukraine happens. So, if there's no, this is the construct that we have all been trying to persuade to believe, right? Number one, U.S. has all these sophisticated weapons, okay? It's just that they're in production, and they're not, they may not be a match to the Russians, but anyhow, we're going to get them a couple of years maybe, and then we're going to sell them to the Europeans, and the Europeans don't have any money to buy them, but maybe they can make some loans. Maybe they can buy them, and then we'll give them to the Ukrainians who don't have any army left. Outside of that, this is a great plan, isn't it? I mean, it's crazy on its face. It's just that the American people, unless they watch Stanley Dhaiphong, Scott and myself, they don't have a prayer of understanding this. Just as they're led to believe that a human being can be illegal.